Okay, we are live and rolling. So, first announcement. Oh, really? Wow. Okay, so I will not be moving very far at all today because I didn't untangle my cord. So, I already know your feelings about this, Simeon. But you are going to watch my video next week. I have already sent an email to your parents with capital letters. Please note. Because, and I'm sorry that it works out this way, that means that the final discussion of the end of Robin Hood will not be live and in person. It will be on video. But if we don't, then you guys are going to be behind a week, and I will go insane trying to remember which class is on which week. And so, yes, Rhett. Okay. So Rhett could discuss the whole thing. Well, then you don't have anything to do this week, but we are going to start reading, I think it's In Freedom's Cause by G.A. Henty over Christmas. And we're going to read, but I'm not going to have you write. So the only thing you have to write is finish the story that I gave you, okay? And you can, hey ladies, are you listening? We have two options. You can email it to me so that I can enjoy it in the comfort of my own home over Christmas break while I sip my cocoa or cider or whatever. Or you can just bring it to me in January. All right, which gives you more than 2 weeks, obviously. If you just don't want to email it, yes. Oh yeah, just go ahead and give it to me now. If you've got a paper now, go for it. And then you're absolved from writing until I see you in January, okay? Not from reading though. So please, 1,000 times please, tune in to YouTube next week. I will record it on Tuesday, and it should be there by Tuesday night. And it's an hour and a half of your life, but you have 3 weeks of Christmas break, and it's only an hour and a half of your life. And you can, yesterday we had a rousing argument about the moral fiber of Robin Hood. It got quite contentious and loud. So, yeah, it might get a little wild and crazy. You will meet my Tuesday students. But do that. But I will not see you in person until January, obviously. Go ahead and get your reading questions out. This reading was a little more, yeah, I don't like to say, Rhett said boring. I don't like to say that because it's important. How governments run is important. And it's important for the historical ramifications of it. But it's more fun to read about jousting and knights and horses and castles. It just is. So we will go through this though because it's an important topic. I want to read to you guys a section. You know what I'm going to do? I do this for the high schoolers. I'm just going to bring this table over because then it gives me when I sit on my chair. So the joke is that my husband and I won 3 free ballroom dance lessons. And I can't even move my chair. It was not bad. We learned the foxtrot on Saturday. Okay, we go tonight. Foxtrot and rumba. He hates. No, that's a Roomba. We're not vacuuming anything as far as I know. Although I feel like if they're giving me free lessons and they want me to clean up afterwards, I'm obligated, but I don't think they do. Okay, so before we go over the questions, are we all with me? You know, I know that everybody's in Christmas mode, and I hear there's food later and food and frolic later. And so everybody's mind is on that. I get that. And this is not the most exciting thing to talk about right the morning of a pizza party and everything. But stick with me, and then you can be without me for a few weeks. Well, I feel like some minds may be on that. Okay, I'm going to read this as part of the first section of the Dorothy Mills book, and I want to talk about it. Whenever men live together so that order may be maintained, and there may be justice between man and his neighbor in communities, no matter how small the communities may be, some form of law has to be observed. Question: Have you ever played a game with someone who has decided that they like to make up their own rules just a little bit, or maybe change the rules as they go along? My son, we used to play Go Fish, which is with colors. This was a very preschooly game, you know. And so my youngest son, we would play Go Fish, but he decided to allot points. It was a point system based on the color of the set that you acquired. But of course the point system changed depending on the colors I got and the colors he got. And so he's like, that orange, that's worth 20. Purple, that's worth 1. What? And so it became a joke. He wasn't really serious. He's always had a little of a snarky sense of humor, even as a toddler. But it was maddening. And it didn't mean anything. I just said, well, you can't change the points. Yes, I decided to change the points. So you can't really play a game. Have you ever played Monopoly and had the argument about free parking? Yeah. Okay, the people who play free parking, that when you get taxed, the money goes in free parking, and then when you land on free parking, you get all the money, and then you get a appearance, because it's not technically in the rules. Free parking is the corner, so it's the opposite corner to go. So we have the jail, and then we have free parking, and then we have go to jail, and then I've played many rounds. I really like Monopoly. So you get these purists, you know, these Monopoly purists, like, that's not in the rules. To put money in the middle of the board, and then the free parking people just take it. And if you really are crazy, you know, every time somebody snatches the free parking money, you put another 50 or 100 or whatever in there, just so that the next person who hits free, there's always money in free parking. But it's not technically, if you get the lid, you know, and you read the rules, it does not say to do this in the rules. This is a tradition that has risen up, but it's become so common that when you meet someone who doesn't do it, like, I have to have my free parking money. You can't do that. And I go, oh, that's what the rules say. So we all need to agree on the rules, don't we?
I was telling someone they had $500 in the middle, like every time, like.
Yes, I've known $500 people.
And I'm like, that's how inflation happens.
It went from 20 to 500. Yeah. So do we all agree? Yes. Yes. See, some people are difficult. Okay. Yes. So when we all get together to do anything, we have to agree on the rules. Do we agree on this rule? That everybody needs to agree, or it ends up in chaos, or at the least, not very nice arguments. Or vote. You could say, are we going to do the free parking thing or are we not? But once you vote, I feel like you shouldn't be able to go halfway through the game and say, I changed my mind, we are going to do the free parking thing now. And then all the people who landed on free parking up until that point in the game, you see, got the shaft. Because they weren't doing it then, and now we're going to do it so you can benefit. We can't just change things. Did they change the rules in the middle of the game? Okay. Oh. See, then that makes it not fair for the, you know, for half the game. Mm-hmm. Well, you shouldn't probably yell at the ref, however. That is not right. You can't just change the game in the middle. So, when we have a country and we set up a government, we all agree on the rules in general. If we want to change the rules, we need to agree on the change. We're good with that, okay. So she says, we have to set up, whenever we're together, we have to set up some form of rules. Are there rules when you come here today? There are rules, aren't there? Because if there weren't, I mean, most of you are nice, upstanding young people and law-abiding young people, but you get a few people that just go crazy, right? And they just start, I don't know what they would do. Behaving poorly, screaming, whatever, running around. And so we all agree on the rules. She says the form that this law takes in different places, communities, or countries is what is called government. It's just the laws that we all agree on in a country. This is the way we're going to live. Communities or countries, listen to this. I need to get my pen. Communities or countries are always governed in one of three ways. By one man, a few men, and by the way, men does not mean male, men means human beings, so women can do it too, or many men. All right, so Ella, you already said it. When it's one man, we call that a monarchy, right? Monos means one in Greek, and they call their rulers archons. That's why all these have archy in them, all these. What do we call it when it's a few men? Do you know? Anarchy. Well, anarchy means no ruler. What is it? I'm not sure what you're saying. Doll? No. Oh, I know what you're trying to say. Oligarchy. I think that's what you're trying to say. And that is the right answer. Oligarchy. Oligos means few. Few rulers. Duh. It's when we have a few people and we say, we trust you to rule over the rest of us. We all probably know what it's called when many people rule. Democracy. Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're trying to say. Think about it. We'll talk about it later. And so, interesting as it is that there are so many different countries around the world, and there have been so many countries in history, it's always one of these. Sometimes it's a mix. You know, for example, we're not really a democracy, we're a republic. We sort of have a mix of these, don't we? The many vote for the few, and the few make the laws on our behalf. And they are, you know, the Congress. Does that make sense? So we can mix it up a little. The monarch can have a council that he works with, right? But we're always going in one of those three directions. She goes on to say, in the early Middle Ages, most countries had kings at the head of government, though they were not always very powerful. For the great feudal lords had their own armed retainers. I'm going to repeat that. The great feudal lords had their own armed retainers. They had their own army of knights. Roy is the king. Congratulations. All right. But if you tick them off, who are your knights, they will come to you, and you know what's behind each of them? A bunch of knights with armor and weapons. And they will say, King Roy, we're not going to do it. Oh, do you see how then the king is in a tight spot? Okay, technically he's the king, but when you're looking at some angry guys with armies, you're like, yeah, maybe I'll listen to what you have to say, because I don't want to die. In the later Middle Ages, especially after the Crusades, the feudal system gradually grew weaker. These guys are all getting weaker. Their armies are drifting away. And so the central government and the kings became stronger. Make sense? The stronger you guys are, the weaker he is. But the weaker you guys get, the stronger he can get. It makes sense, right? Okay. So when you have a king and he rules all by himself, nobody tells him what to do. He tells you guys to just go trying to think of something that's not a rude phrase to tell you to go do. Okay, go home and just leave me alone, all right? This is an absolute monarchy, all right? No one else tells me what to do. I tell you what to do. I say jump, you say how high. That's how this works. And no one can correct me. That's an absolute monarchy. But when a king works with a council of people, so maybe, actually I can tell you the whole lesson almost in a nutshell. In England, I'm coming over to this table. In England, Roy stays king, and you guys, your knight army kind of drifts away, but all you noblemen stay strong, and you get together in a council, and you come together, and you counsel Roy on what he should do, and Roy waits for your approval. Boom, that's England. France, you guys, weaker, 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 king more powerful, until you guys have, basically you're just begging the king for favors, and you have no power over him. France. Yeah, I probably have answered numerous ones of the questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's probably question 4. So let's talk about England, where we don't, paper towel, we don't get this. We get what they call a constitutional monarchy. There are rules to be followed, in other words, for the king. He's got to work according to the laws. He can't just do whatever he wants. He's not like my son playing Go Fish. Yeah, the oranges are going to be worth 100 points this time. No, you can't do that. There are no points for the colored fish. Yeah, there are. Yeah, no. And it always happened when I was winning, you know. So let's talk about England. Henry II. Henry II, by the way, is the king in Robin Hood. All right, and somebody yesterday said, what about King Richard? Because at the end of the Disney Robin Hood, it's King Richard. I know, King Richard will show up. Henry's gonna die and King Richard will show up. It's okay. But for most of the life of Robin Hood, Henry II is king. We're gonna meet him in the end. You meet him, right? And Eleanor of Aquitaine, his wife. So, very strong king, a little bit pushy. This is the guy who, if you remember, famously got ticked off with Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and said, who will rid me of this troublesome priest? And some guys took him seriously and went and killed him in the cathedral. Same guy. But when Henry died, Richard, his son, became king. And where did Richard spend a lot of time? We talked about Richard the Lionhearted. Where did he go? Fighting where? He went on crusade. And remember, when you leave your country, the people who are left behind may be not looking out for your best interests. And his brother John was the guy left behind. His brother John had already been in a plot to overthrow their dad. Did you read that part in Dorothy Mills? It said that Henry II found out about a plot with the French to overthrow him, and they somehow acquired a list of the plotters, and top on the list was his own son. Oh, man, that's gotta hurt. So what happens with these guys if Roy is gone on crusade? Are they getting weaker or are they getting stronger? They're getting stronger because they don't have, Roy, we hope you come back. Be careful over there. But in the meantime, we're going to go about our business, right? And we're going to become stronger and stronger. So this is what happened in England. By the time Richard came back, and then you read in Dorothy Mills, Richard was, we're going to talk about England and France in a little bit, but Richard was in France trying to, hey, Isabella, do you want me to keep recording? Or do you want to watch the part that you've missed so far? Okay, you want me, I'm just going to keep recording so that the whole thing will be there. But you can just stop at this moment when you came in because I'm all plugged in. Richard was off in France attacking a castle that he probably shouldn't have been attacking. Anyway, got shot by an arrow and killed. Yes. Where he forgave but then they executed him after Richard died. We'll talk about why Richard was there fighting in France in a minute. But so John became king, and John, we talked about him a little bit. If you've watched the Disney movie of Robin Hood, you have a picture of Prince John, right? Of a sniveling, the lion. Somebody said yesterday, why doesn't he have a mane? He's like a lion. I was like, yeah, it was probably intentional. It wasn't quite that bad. No evidence he was sucking his thumb on a regular basis, okay, like in the Disney movie. But he was not a wise ruler. We already talked about the fact that he ticked off, and she mentions it again in this chapter, he ticked off the Pope and everyone else by refusing to accept the new Archbishop of Canterbury. The Pope then turned around and put the whole, I couldn't remember this word yesterday, interdict. That's the word I couldn't remember. He put them under interdict, no church in England, no church for you until the king comes around. You guys are ticked off. You're all the subjects. Okay, now you're the peasants. Congratulations, you're all the peasants belonging to these three gentlemen. And you too. And everybody is I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. You know what? This is the great wheel of fortune. Some days you're up and some days you're down. John was out of favor with everyone when they shut down the church. Not to mention that he was just oppressive. So finally, I was laying in bed the other night thinking, we haven't put anything on our timelines in ages. We need to put this on our timelines. In 1215, you should have a timeline that goes from 1,000 to 1,500. You know, there should be one page that's 1,000 on one end and 1,500 on the other end. I know, I'm sorry, I just kind of completely forgot about our timelines. This thing I circle, we're going to add. In 1215, they took John, who was king, to an island in the Thames River, and they presented him with a document, and they said, sign it. Now, things have sunk pretty bad for Roy if he's John now, if he's the king, and these guys can just take him to an island and put a pen in his hand and say, sign it. But he was desperate. This thing he signed, we call the Magna Carta. It's Latin, and it means the Great Charter. And Carta is feminine, right? So, for feminine, okay. All right, so I want you to write this down. I'll shut up for a minute. 1215, Magna Carta. This is one of the hallmark, if you only know a few dates in history, ever. This is a good one to know. This is an important one. 1215, and I will tell you why in a moment. Okay, so this was the first question I asked you. What is the Magna Carta? What did it say?
The Charter freed civilians under John's tyranny from crazy taxation, injustice, and randomly being thrown in prison.
Okay, yes. Crazy injustice and random throwing in prison. This sums it up nicely. I want to read a couple of the points in the Magna Carta. You know, I had a student yesterday who had seen it, has seen the document, which is kind of cool. Now this is a funny word, scutage. Scutage is a funny word. Even I think it's a funny word. But it means taxes, particularly taxes they raise for the sake of waging war. Okay? Just think of it as imposed taxes. No scutage or aid shall be imposed in our kingdom, save by the common council of our kingdom. Roy can't impose any taxes unless the council comes together and says, yes, you may do that. Except in 3 cases. Do you remember our feudal aids? The feudal that a vassal owed? He said, except for the ransoming of our body, the making of our oldest son a knight, and for once marrying our oldest daughter. And for these purposes, it shall be only a reasonable aid. You can't say, I need $1 billion to make my son a knight. Reasonable aid. So, think about it. Roy's just so happy, he's king, and he's just tootling along, he's doing whatever he wants to. But you know, being a king costs money. You gotta eat, you gotta take care of all your household, and then if you wanna do anything, if you wanna wage war against a neighboring person, if you wanna send soldiers to put down, Rhett's getting kinda high and mighty, and we might need to send some soldiers to put him in his place. And so this all costs money. And you run out of money. What are you going to do? Yes, but you can't do it unless you call them all together and say, may I? Ooh, you're dangerous. Yes, but if you're going to get a kickback, you might agree to it. I'm glad you're not king. You're very dangerous. Assassins will come, yes. Don't sleep too easy tonight, because those peasants are going to come for you. I see Matthias is already plotting. I'm taking him out. No, more taxes. Actually, there was once a king of England who tried to go for a long period of time without calling his council together. The council eventually became something we continue to this day to call Parliament in England. And Charles I was the king, and he had plans that his council didn't like. So he just said, you know what, I don't need you. And he went for years without calling them, because apparently he had pretty good savings, you know. But eventually he needed money. It happens eventually. And he had to call them together, and they wouldn't do what he wanted. They wouldn't make an agreement, so he just told them, leave again then. It's called the short parliament. I don't know, they were there a day or two, I don't know. And then he tried to go for a while, didn't work. Finally he calls them because he needs money. And they met for a long time. Anyway, long story short, they end up having a civil war in England. Did you know they had a civil war in England? They had a civil war, supporters of the king versus supporters of Parliament. The king ended up getting his head chopped off. Sorry. But so, you know, maybe you ought to just be careful what you do. So this really worked in England. I mean, that's unfortunate that they executed their king and they had a civil war. But the fact that the king could not just go on indefinitely and not call them together because he needed money. Okay, so that's one thing, Magna Carta. Next thing, no free man shall be taken or imprisoned or dispossessed or outlawed or banished or in any way injured, nor will we go upon him nor send upon him except by the legal judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Legal judgment of his peers. Does that sound familiar to you? What do we call that? I get to have the jury. I get to go in front of the jury. What did you say? Peer pressure, yes. Magna Carta says, you can't arrest me and just put me in prison and lock me up and throw away the key and forget I'm there. You have to bring me out. You have to charge me with what you say I did. And then I get to come before a group of people who will decide whether or not I'm guilty. That's the law. Now, have you ever seen, this is kind of a long book for you guys to have read, but some of you might be precocious readers. The Count of Monte Cristo is a famous novel which involves someone being locked up when the key is thrown away. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. same things happens to them. But both of these happen in France. They don't happen in England, because in England, you can't do that by law. So we have, I'm going to give you this is another Latin, extra Latin, and because it's fun to learn and it's fun to say. So in legal terms in America, also in England, there's a term called habeas corpus. Have you ever heard of habeas corpus? It does. We have the right of habeas corpus. That's in the U.S. Constitution. There's a right of habeas corpus. They're like, what the heck is habeas corpus? Okay, literally, it means you may have the body. What? That doesn't help. All right, but what it really means is this. You have to take my body, my very self, when you throw me in prison, and bring me out and present me to a judge and say, she did something rotten and she should be punished. You can't put me in jail and forget about my body, right? Just forget about me. And it's, oh, we overlooked you. You have to bring my very self, my body, out of the jail and put me in front of a judge and accuse me of something. Or you have to let me go. That's the right we have. And why do we have that right? Because we were Englishmen. I know people in this room may have come from all different countries to America, your ancestors, but we were Englishmen. Whether you were from Russia or the Middle East or wherever you were, when you came to America, you were an English colony, right? And when we fought for independence, we fought because we thought we weren't getting the rights of Englishmen. You're not treating us according to Magna Carta. You can't do that. Specifically, I know you guys know it, you're taxing us without our consent, right? You're taxing the colonies without our consent. That's why it's important to, Magna Carta is gone now. That's why this is so important to us, because these are our rights. We're the heir to this. If they hadn't done this, think about it, if you hadn't trapped Roy on that island, we might just be thrown in jail today, and they can just forget about you. Wouldn't that be awful? Can you imagine if somebody, so Matthias has it in for, Alice. Sorry, Alice was looking innocent there. They're always the ones that you got to watch out for, the innocent looking one. And he just decides to make up something about her and get her arrested and throw her in prison, and then she sits there for 20 years. And nobody knows why she's in prison. She doesn't even know why she's in prison. Can you imagine how horrifying that would be? I'm going to die here and I don't even know why. Well, it's because Matthias is evil. But Alice didn't know that. Okay, here's the last one that Dorothy Mills tells us about. To no one will we sell. To no one will we deny or delay right or justice. What do we call it when you sell justice? Bribery, right? I will pay you, judge or jury or whoever you were. I will pay you to make a decision according to what I want, not according to justice. So you're selling, I'll put justice in quotes because it's not real justice. Can't do that. Now, does that mean no one ever will try to do that? No. When you play the board games, does no one, hopefully, if you're playing with nice, upstanding people, maybe they never try to push the rules. But perhaps you might play with people. We've all agreed on the rules. But we're going to just push it a little bit, and see if we can get away with it. No, I think when you roll that, you get an extra turn. Like, no. Have you ever played a game with someone where you have to repeatedly consult the rules? Let me check the rules. Yeah, look, we've been there. So this is what made England a constitutional monarchy. The kings of England could no longer do whatever they wanted, right? So my next question was, what motivated kings of England to summon a parliament? We've already asked this. Why would Roy call these guys together? money. Money. So it's this nice balanced system. Great, king, we will obey you, we will listen to you, but you're going to run out of money eventually, and you're going to have to call us together. And when you do, we're going to tell you what we want in return from you. And it's a give and take. That's what happened in England. Now, France, different story, right? I asked you guys, what situation created much tension and fighting between England and France? Now this was a harder question. This one you have to read between the lines a little bit. You can't just find a sentence that says it. But did anybody guess what I'm fishing for? Why are England and France at odds with each other? Why is Richard fighting in France and getting shot by the arrow? Do you think you know? Yeah, I gave you, my hint was, let's start with the hint. Where did William the Conqueror come from? William the Conqueror came from France, right? Does that help? Apparently not, because that was on the page. Here, I want to erase part of this. Do you remember that we were talking about the feudal system, and we had the king at the top, and then he had his lords. I'm writing this in no particular order. I'm just calling them various nobility names. Okay, and then you have dukes and earls and counts. Okay, do you remember this? And then these people owe them service, and these people owe them protection, right? And that was the deal. But think about it. Let's put King of France here. And let's put William the Conqueror here. William went off to become King of England, but he's still a vassal of the King of France. Think about it. I'm the king of my own country, but I'm under this king. Do you think the kings of England like being under the king of? No, we don't like that. We don't want to do that. Not to mention, William owned land in France. England owns land in France. Then, to make it even more complicated, these English kings marry French ladies. And the French ladies come with land. Eleanor of Aquitaine, that you're going to meet in the last part of Robin Hood, Henry II's wife. Aquitaine is an area of France. She owns part of France. So it gets this messed up, really weird, dysfunctional relationship between England and France, right? Where the king of France, you're my vassals. Well, I'm the king of my own country, and we own half your country. So take that. Does that make sense? So there's going to be problems for hundreds of years. I'm not even sure, I don't even think the English to this day are super fond of the French. I'm going by British comedy. They make a lot of digs, at French people. So, in 1180, Dorothy Mills tells us, Philip II, called Philip Augustus, he's the king who went on crusade with Richard. Listen to this, inherited a country, France, in which the King of England ruled more land than the King of France. The King of England rules more land in France than the King of France. This is going to cause problems, right? And it did. And so this is why Richard is fighting in France and gets killed, because one of his castles, Richard's castles, was being infringed upon by the local French. And they take over his castle, and he wants to take it back. They're fighting. But in France, I'm going to skip over, just for time constraints, St. Louis, the King of France, St. Louis, the namesake of the city in Missouri. Very godly king, went on 2 crusades. They were both kind of miserable failures because he was very unwell when he went. I feel like you should be in good health before you go off to war, in general. But again, when the king's away, when Roy's away, when the King of France is away, things happen at home, right? But things happened differently in France. The counts will play, yes. So in France, they developed a system where we would call the clergy, so the priests and bishops and those people, and the lords, and representatives from the commons. But they never developed Magna Carta. They never developed a system of rules. So when they played their game, the rules changed, right? Depending on the king. You ever play a game and there's just one person playing the game and they're particularly vocal or strong-willed, right? And they just sort of railroad their rules onto other people. The kings of France were able to railroad their rules onto other people. And they never got the rights that the Englishmen got. And that's why we end up with novels like The Count of Monte Cristo, where in France you can get thrown in prison and they don't ever look for you again, unless you escape, which you did. Oh, no, not today. No, not today. No, I mean medieval France, all right? No, and Renaissance France. No, no, don't be afraid to go tour France. No one's going to throw you in prison in France and throw away the key. I'm pretty sure. Oh, they have a president. France is a president today. They don't have it. But they never got those rights. So in France, we get eventually an absolute monarchy, all right? Where it gets to the point where the council, so they were England, now they're France. Roy sits in his gold and jewels, and if you ever read A Tale of Two Cities, there's this wonderful image. It's not the king, but it's a nobleman. And every morning, all the lesser noblemen come, and they just hope he will smile at them. They just hope he will speak to them, because if he walks by and he doesn't talk to them, it's like, oh no, my life is over, I'm ruined. That's the power that the nobility had. That's the power the king had. You guys probably know where this ended up in France too. Eventually, France had a revolution because people don't like to live that way forever, to worry about what the whim of the king is going to be. And it wasn't pretty. Thousands of people got their heads cut off. And you know what happened during the French Revolution? The rules kept changing. 2 months ago, you were on the side fighting for freedom, and now, oops, the side fighting for freedom moved on and left you behind, and now they think you're the enemy, and now you get your head. It's happened to a lot of people. England had a civil war, and they did execute their king. But they came out of it, this strong constitutional monarchy. France killed their king and queen, and they had years that are known as the Reign of Terror. It's the difference. When people have rights and can use them, it's different than when people have no rights. So before we said I probably answered your fourth question. Oh, yes, the whole class so far has been the answer to the fourth question, right? How did the development of the French government take a very different path? Because the English government gave people rights, and there were restrictions on the king. In France, there were no restrictions. But I'd like to go back and talk for a minute before we move on about these three kinds of government. Is there one way? We're gonna take away the absolute. All right, and just turn it back to monarchy. Is there one of these that's the best? Is there one that's better than the others? And if you think so, why? This isn't a trick question. I'm just, yeah, go for it. Okay, so are saying two heads are better than one. right? So 1,000 heads are better than 2, and maybe 1,000,000 heads are better than 1,000. So presumably, the more people you have making a decision, the closer to right you may be. All right? Does anybody want to add to that or choose another form? Ella, what do you think?
Sometimes people are messed up. No, in democracy. You know, like people don't always know what they want, or they don't always make the decision the best way. So like they could pick somebody just because they look good or they talk good or something. You know, like rather than having like really has the best interest of the country. So I think an oligarchy is better than a monarchy. But and democracy is good, but you just gotta be careful. So I think it's good that our country has oligarchy. In that way, kind of like a democracy, because yeah, it just increases your chances of and unified. Because like a million people can go a million different ways, you know, and we have like I don't know how many people are in Congress, but like that many people, it's like less likely.
These are two, just a second, right? These are two really good points. And I think we sort of know both of them are true. That often, when we have to make a tough decision, we get counsel, right? We ask people's advice. And you feel like if you ask 10 people and 9 of them all agree on the path you should take, we feel pretty confident about it. But if we ask 50 people and 49 of them all agree, we feel really fairly confident. But on the other hand, maybe those 49 people are jerks. You know, it kind of depends on who you ask. And sometimes, let me let Rhett say what he's going to say, and then I'll.
The thing about democracy is that, like, you're going to have, like, what are the chances that you're going to get 49 years? Like,
Yes.
you have tons of different things coming into the decision. So if you only have a few, then there's less of a, it's less than this. Because I mean, in a democracy, people are voted in. And then, because they're voting because they feel they're going to make the right decision. And so they don't vote if it's dirty. But you're kind of saying it's sort of a little.
Yes, yes. On the other hand, when groups of people get together, I think you guys know this. When groups of people get together, sometimes they do or think or behave in a certain way that they wouldn't alone, right? Like groups can be swayed one direction or another. We heard the term peer pressure from Jesse just a minute ago. And so that can also be acting. So I'm not necessarily saying you're wrong, but I'm saying there's also a flip side to groups, right? Group decisions, because groups can get carried away in one direction. I do. And this is why I said this is a trick question. I'm not fishing for you to pronounce one of these as best. Like, this is just an open question. I don't think this question has an answer.
I think we can agree that it's because if one person is making all the decisions, nobody else can help with it.
Yes.
Well, what about
Yeah, see, so here's the thing. What would you rather? Would you rather? Does your family ever do this? My kids still do this to me. Ask me, would you rather? Just the most random. Would you rather have tiny ankles or enormous arms? I'm like, no, neither. Seriously, this was asked me in the past year by my 23-year-old. Somebody calls me. He calls me on the phone. Would you rather? No, I'm not ready for this. No, let's not go there. So, would you rather live under a godly king like King David, or in a democracy where everyone is crazy and godless? See, so it's really hard. It sort of depends on who the king is, doesn't it? And it depends on who the people are. That's why it's almost an unanswerable question. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, among the many other things he wrote about, remember we talked about Aristotle inspiring medieval philosophy and Thomas Aquinas. He wrote about politics. And he said, he basically didn't say any one of these was best or any one was worst. He said they all can turn into something bad. We have to have them, right? Because if we don't have any rules or any government, there are crazy people that will do whatever they want. We're sinful people, so we have to be told what to do. But, so he said a monarchy, when it goes bad, it's not King David, it's King Saul, all right, or somebody much worse. It turns into tyranny, right? So if you have a wicked king and he goes bad and he abuses the power, because in theory, the king believes he's the father and caretaker of his people, and he wants what is best for his people, in theory. Well, this is just any king that grabs all power, but I was talking about King David was my, because he said he's called a man after God's own heart, who presumably has God's interests and his people's interests above his own. So that would be good, but they're not all like that. So Aristotle said when this goes south, when this goes bad, we get a tyrant who's just telling people what to do and building up his own power. And that's bad for the country and that's bad for the people. He said when an oligarchy, when we pick the few, presumably the few that we pick would be the wisest ones. That makes sense, right? Who do we want to rule us? People who are wise and kind and good and godly, and we want you to come together and make our laws. That sounds great, but not everybody's like that. When it goes south, we get an aristocracy. He called it something else too, but which I'm not remembering, which has a different flavor. But aristocracy, we all know what this means. The few end up being the rich, right? The few end up being the people from the special families, the old established families. You might be a total idiot jerk, but you're rich and you belong to the special family, so you're in. See, this isn't good for the people either, right? Yes, this is the bad thing about, because not all monarchies, glad you brought this up. See, we could go on and on, but I won't, because I know it's not of super interest to everybody. Not all monarchies are hereditary. You could choose the next king. Maybe the people could vote for the next king. For a while, even in the Roman Empire, they had some emperors, and in the 2nd century, and it's known the time of the good emperors, they stopped just having their son rule. And they started adopting someone who they thought would make a good next ruler. And Nerva and Hadrian and Trajan and some of those great rulers of the 2nd century were chosen like that. And then we got Marcus Aurelius, and he went back, oh, I'm going to let my son Commodus be king, be emperor next. And it's a little violent, so maybe you've never seen the movie Gladiator. I've never seen the parts where I just close my eyes. If they step into the arena, I just close my eyes, because I don't like that. But other than that, it's a good movie. Anyway, and so it's about Commodus, right? And he's a jerk. So this can go bad. When a democracy goes bad, it's a little more complicated. First of all, if they throw off all the rules and everybody just says, we're going to do whatever we want, that's called anarchy, right? No ruler at all. But have you ever noticed, if you turn on the news at all, you know this, but let me backtrack. My husband and I like to watch Survivor. All right, we've always watched Survivor. We've watched every single Survivor, although I'm not really enjoying this current one. And so there are 41 of them. And yes. So in the very first one, and I don't know if you know anything about Survivor, it just involves taking people out to a remote location, and they have to live and fend for themselves, all right? So don't turn always parental consent. Just because Mrs. Ferguson said she watches something doesn't mean, okay? Always ask your parents. And when my kids were little, we didn't let them watch. We taped it and we watched it after they went to bed. But it involves not only can they find food for themselves in a hostile environment and deal with the storms and the cold and build themselves shelter and build a fire, for crying out loud. Build your own fire with no flint. Eventually they get flint, but you know, with the sticks, rubbing the sticks. But how is it when you get dropped somewhere with 18 or 20 people that you don't know, and you don't want to irritate them, but you're hungry and tired? You see, and you know how hard it's hard to be hungry and tired and not irritate other people. Do you know what I mean? We all know this. And then some people are really strong. You know, like, I can get the fish and I can build the shelter. But the other people say, you know, he's really strong. I think we should get rid of him. So they vote him out. Each week they vote someone out. You get to vote to send someone away. Because they're a threat. They might win at the end. Because everybody might admire them. They say, oh, I don't know. I think everybody's going to admire him at the end. I think he should go because he might win and then I might not win. So it seems like if you're really good and strong and tough, you would be the winner. But it's not all, but you're a threat. Okay, so anyway, but the point I wanted to make with bringing this up is, when the Survivor first started, we were very intrigued by this concept. And so my husband and I sat down and watched it. And something happened that no one expected, including the makers of the show. We all envisioned, so at the end of the show, they go and they have this council. There's 2 teams at the beginning, and then they have a challenge. They have some physical, contest they have to do. And the team that loses has to vote someone out. All right, so it keeps going back and forth. We thought they would all just every time go in, and every person would think in their own mind, I wonder who I would like to get rid of. And then they go in a room and they write their name down on a piece of paper and they put it in and then they count the votes. But what happened was, there was a man playing, his name was Richard Hatch. And he had a legal background. And he was smart. He was kind of annoying, a little bit of a jerk. And he said, you know what, I have a brilliant idea. If I go convince this group of people that person should go, I can form my own little group. And I can whisper to them, vote for this person. I can recruit. And he developed his own faction. And we were watching, we were all aghast. That's not right. He can't do that. The rules never said he couldn't do that. And he won. He won the very first Survivor because and then you see he turned on the people that he got in his group. At the end, when it was just them left, then he'd whisper to some people about that person, and he worked the system. Now, I'm not telling you this story to say this is a model that I want you to copy. I'm saying it came as a total surprise that a group of people might all band together in this game and target other people. And then the mastermind would then turn on the people he used as tools and turn them against each other until he's the last man standing. It was very smart. And some people thought he was an absolute snake for doing it. But technically, it didn't say you couldn't do that. Nobody'd ever done this before. So the reason I tell you the story is this. Democracy is a lot like that. When our founding fathers wanted people to vote for our Constitution, they wrote the Constitution, and then they wrote letters to people, to each state saying, please, please vote for the Constitution. Our country needs this Constitution. One of the things that the people who said, no, we don't like the sound of this new government at all, one of the things they were worried about is what Richard Hatch did. What about people who just band together? What about factions? What about people who all get together to railroad whatever they want to happen? And what if that people is the majority? Does that make sense? This is kind of a complicated government thing, but when you boil it down, it makes sense. What do we do about that? And so the founding fathers that were defending the Constitution tried to explain how we would balance it out by the fact that we're a republic, that hopefully we choose wise leaders who can overlook crazy faction. But when democracy goes bad, we get a crazy group of people railroading what they want into law. And when you get, this is unsettling because it seems like the news, but when you get a lot of people, when you get a majority and a lot of unrest stirred up because they want to take the country a certain way. Aristotle, I'm not saying, Aristotle said, then someone will rise up and take over. And guess what happens? You turn into that. That this is another road to that. Because we just get tired of the unrest. We get tired of the unrest and we say, please, somebody, you look wise, please help us fix this. And we ask somebody to take over, and we let them take over, and when they do, they don't let go. Yes. We want to be like all the other nations, they said, didn't they? And that's what Samuel said, right? The kings will take your children for service. They will take your money. They will take your horse. Do you understand what kings do? So anyway, it's interesting. Even after saying all this, politics is not really my area of interest. It doesn't thrill me, you know. But it is kind of interesting to look through history and see the ways we have chosen to rule ourselves. There's no right way. They all have an upside and they all have a downside, I guess is the point of today's lesson. That said, I'm thankful to live in a country where I can choose the people who make my rules. Because, like Rhett said at the beginning, we still have a belief that the normal person has some level of common sense. You know, I still believe that's true. I think we hear loud voices sometimes. Sometimes the people without common sense have very loud voices. And the people with common sense are quiet. And they go about their daily lives. I'm thankful where God put me. But it's interesting that it didn't have to be this way. Government doesn't have to be the way we do it. Okay, thank you for listening to government. We are going to read about the 100 Years' War next. Joan of Arc, the Battle of Agincourt, Henry V, all that good stuff. Now, I am going to, this is my second speech to you about next week. Please, please, please watch my YouTube video because there's an extra week this semester that you guys, Merry Christmas. That's my gift to you. You get an extra class. I see the muttering over there. It's like, oh. So I want to pass around. I've got 2 reading questions for you, okay? I've got the reading questions for this next week. This will be what I'm going to talk about on the video, 100 Years' War. And then I'm going to come around and give you a second reading question. That's the one for the class in January. Does that make sense? You will know the difference because one of them says chapter 21 and the other says chapter 22. And guess what? We're reading 21 before 22. We good? And when you watch the video, I will tell you what to read after Robin Hood. See, now you have to look at least at the end. It will only be an hour and a half. And like I said last week, you can wear your jammies and sip cocoa. You can bring a computer into bed and just sit there and, yes, you can, Matthias. And I'm also going to send your parents the email next week, okay? And I sent out one this morning telling everybody, please note, there's going to be another class next week. Please join me. Oh, are you suggesting that my classes put you to sleep? Oh, okay. Thank you. I feel less I have an extra one, and I don't know why. Okay, so everybody, the thing I just handed you is the next reading for next week. Now I'm going to come around and give you another one. And notice, I remembered to punch the holes for you. It's another gift for you. I don't really think that deserved applause. Thank you for the... You guys are sensible. Save your applause for something worthy, if that ever happens. All right, I've learned my lesson. Oh my goodness. All right. Oh, and if it makes you happy, I don't know why this would make anyone happy, but I feel like it might. Guys, calm down. After the 100 Years' War, we're going to talk about the Black Death. That's always interesting, too. I'll tell you, I hate to say this. I am not belittling. I don't mean to belittle the people who have died of COVID, but the Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe. That's a raging disease. A third of Europe died during the plague. Can you even, that is mind-boggling to me. Whole towns died. There was no one left to bury the dead because they were all dead. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying, my son-in-law has COVID right now, actually, and he's not feeling well at all. And my daughter has it. And some people, it's just, like, most of the people I know who have had it are like, yeah, it was a little blip, had a mild fever, and I was fine. But a few people, it hits them, and we don't know why. So, but this was a serious the Black Plague was a serious world-changing event to a different level. So those are the things we're going to talk about. For our remaining time, I want to talk about Robin Hood. And I specifically want to read a couple of things, and then I want to get a discussion going here. As I said, we had quite the argument yesterday, and I want to get your feedback. But there was something from last week that I wanted to read, and I neglected to. This is the chapter in which they meet Alan a Dale, the minstrel, who was in love with the girl. You remember the story? Okay. And Robin Hood set up their wedding. And they were out in the woods, and they were listening to stories of King Arthur's time and great heroes. And here's what it says. "It doth make a man better," quoth Robin Hood, "to hear of those noble men that lived so long ago. When one doth list to such tales, his soul doth say, put by thy poor little likings, and seek to do likewise. Truly, one may not do as nobly oneself, but in the striving, one is better." What is he saying? What did he just say? Put it in your own words. It makes you better for trying. That's really what we get out of stories, isn't it? When we get out of history. That's way cooler and more important than you remembering that the Magna Carta was signed in 1215. I'd rather you remembered John was a jerk. Don't be a jerk. You know? That Richard was well loved, but he could be cruel. Let's emulate the well-loved and not do the cruel part, you know? Yeah, Bailey. I need my drink. Yes. Yes. You know what? If you see older relatives this Christmas or New Year's, take a few minutes to ask them about what it was like when they were young. It doesn't cost you anything to sit and listen to them a little bit, and they love to tell it, and they may tell you something very, very surprising. I set a pie on fire once and had to use it. It wasn't my fault. The oven was malfunctioning. That's what it let me know. It is so let's listen to the stories of our families, but also the long ago. When we think about knighthood, you know, what can we emulate? What can we be better? And we may not be that person, but we can be better than we are. Okay, anyway, I've preached at you enough about that. And then my other flag, oh, I want to save my other flag till later. So, here was the question that caused such a brouhaha in class yesterday. Is Robin Hood right or wrong in what he's doing? Bailey? Okay. Okay, so you would, have you ever guys ever heard the saying, the end justifies the means? But have you heard the saying? And you know what it means? So the end, in other words, the goal, if I have a good goal, it justifies the means. It doesn't matter how I get it, if the goal is good. And I hope you can all see that that's not really true. I want to, I'm trying to think of a good goal that I could use terrible ends to. I want our country to have good laws, so I'm going to go bribe every senator to make good laws. But my goal is good. I want us all to have good laws. I'm going to be doing things completely illegal to get it, but hey, my goal is good. Okay. So, did everybody hear what Rhett said? Hang on, Bailey. So what if the poor who are receiving the money from Robin Hood, they're only receiving what was theirs? Would that be your position?
Like, it got stolen
By the sheriff and his tax collectors. Do you want to address that, or did you have something else? But that's more like an unforeseen consequence. But our actions do have unforeseen consequences sometimes. That's interesting. Let's hold on to that. Let's go here first, and then we'll go over there. So, anybody want to agree with Rhett, or anyone want to challenge Rhett? You want to agree with him? If someone, so let's put it, we need to put it in terms we can think. Okay, yes. Okay.
Like, stealing is stealing, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, even if it's not your job to, if the sheriff like stole from this guy on the street, like, it's not your job to steal that. You know, like, you could argue for, like, justify it, like, try and figure it out, but you should not have steal that. Like, from the, it's too long from the door.
Okay, okay. So, but let's bump up the scenario into another category that is more shocking, murder. All right, because theft is one thing, murder. So if somebody is a serial killer or murderer of some sort, okay, is it okay for you to just go kill them so they don't go kill other people?
Because if you think about it like any other, like God says that he doesn't tolerate sins, like this one's worse than another, so murder is sin. So it's wrong, but he has the right idea. Like he's got the right idea of what he's trying to do.
He wants to save lives.
Motive, but there's he shouldn't be doing anything.
Roy, what do you want to say? Did he just steal? Did he just steal everything you wanted to say? Oh, don't you hate it? And you were the king too. It's just wrong. Okay, yes. Hey, shh, guys. Mm. Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm. But he was the sheriff, right? Like the sheriff, the legal authority is the one who's oppressing. Mm-hmm. Right. That's a very good point. What do we do when power is corrupt and there's no other power to appeal to? Okay, yes, Bailey. That's okay. Mm-hmm. But it's still killing. So taking, if we just said, I want to save all the people that they might kill in the future by taking them out. By appealing to the law, right? It's okay. It's okay. Brett.
I don't like what you're saying before, like, because no one likes to do, like, if you, just a lot of times you, like, look up to the police to protect you and stuff, but if there's no one else to look up to, maybe then he was doing something else.
Mm.
And then give an example of, like, yeah, being in the room. If there's no one else to look up to, then maybe you're doing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, you do first, so I don't steal anything you're going to say.
Is it your call to decide if that person is worthy of being looked up to? Like, what if you are personally corrupt and you're thinking when that person that you're looked up to is good, you know, and, but you're just trying to solve it.
But in the Robinson book, I think that it's very obvious that the sheriff is the one that's wrong in his thing.
So let me read, just let me interject this. So do you remember, in your reading, they met Sir Richard of the Lee. Sir Richard, who, one of my students on Tuesday, a week or two ago, had asked, well, how does Robin know that they're wealthy, that they have money or not? Said, well, obviously from their appearance. It makes the assumption. So he meets Sir Richard, and you remember the moment he says, oh, you know, I keep an inn. He gives his little speech that he always gives. I keep an inn in the Greenwood, and I serve you well and entertain you, but all my visitors must pay. And Sir Richard says, I take your meaning well, but I only have a small amount of money. This is all I have in the world. And Robin said, is this true? On your knightly honor? And he said, yes. And he said, here's my purse, you can check. And he says, no, put your purse away. I trust you. But how did this happen? And then Sir Richard tells him the backstory of how, if you remember, his son was jousting and he killed his opponent accidentally, but his opponent's dad had influence at court and arrested Sir Richard's son, even though it was an accident, and he had to pay an enormous ransom to get him free, 500 pounds or something like that. And in the meantime, he had to borrow it from the church, right, from the bishop, and didn't know how he was going to repay it, and he was broke, basically. So he brings him back. He says, well, you know what, I'll entertain you anyway. And you come and you tell us your story, and we're going to see what we can do to help you. So at the same time, Little John has kidnapped the Bishop of Hereford, who has all his, he's a bishop, he's a churchman. He's supposed to love God more than things. I mean, we're all supposed to do that. But he's supposed to be an example for his flock of loving God more than things. And let me read this. At the end, they have their little entertainment, you know, they shoot and they eat and they whack each other with staffs for people's entertainment. And then Robin says, who hath the score of the goods? In other words, who's the keeper of all the bishop's stuff? Who's got his pack animals? Then up spake the smallest of all in a trembling voice. An old man was he, with a gentle wrinkled face. That have I, but I pray thee harm me not. Nay, quoth Robin, I've never harmed harmless man yet, but give it me, good father. So the old man did as he was bidden, and handed Robin the tablet on which was marked down the account of the various packages upon the horses. This Robin handed to Will Scarlet, bidding him to read the same. So Will Scarlet, lifting his voice that all might hear, began, 3 bales of silk to Quinton, the mercer at Ancaster. That we touch not, quoth Robin, for this Quinton is an honest fellow, who hath risen by his own thrift. So the bales of silk were laid aside without being opened. 1 bale of silk velvet for the Abbey of Beaumont. What are these priests want of silk velvet? Quoth Robin. Nevertheless, though they need it not, I will not take all from them. Measure it off into 3 lots, 1 to be sold for charity, 1 for us, and 1 for the abbey. This too was done as Robin Hood bade. 2 score of great wax candles for the chapel of St. Thomas. That belongeth fairly to the chapel, quoth Robin, so lay it to one side. Far be it from us to take from the blessed St. Thomas that which belongeth to him. So this also was done according to Robin's bidding, and the candles were laid to one side, along with honest Quinton's unopened bales of silk. And so they go through the list. And I marked that to read because I thought it showed how discerning Robin was. He doesn't take the stuff of people that he knows is earned honestly. The silk for the Quinton. He even doesn't take all the bishop's silk velvet, even though he thinks they don't need any silk velvet. So in my mind, when I saw that passage, that's what I was thinking. See how fair and honest and upright Robin Hood is. But I had a student yesterday who really challenged all of us on this, and she said, he's playing God. who gave him the right to decide. Quentin gets that. You get that. I'm taking part of that. This goes to the Abbey. He's now making decisions about what does not belong to him. And so this is the problem. You know, I mean, his decisions are good decisions. I like his decisions.
Where did he get that authority?
But where did he get that authority? That's the troubling thing with Robin Hood. That he makes these decisions. He makes these godlike decisions on who. So earlier we said, what if the money was stolen, and what if he's only taking back what belonged to the poor, which I still think is a legitimate idea, although it turns us into sort of a vigilante. You know, if we put it in murder terms and we go out and we're just executing people, we turn into a vigilante, and that's illegal. Yeah. So anyway, do you like Robin? Nonetheless, I mean, did you say you don't like Robin? Why do you not like Robin? I have to ask. Any particular reason? Oh, why did he keep a third of it for himself? Somebody called him out on this yesterday too. Like, well, you know, my reaction was, my not thinking very hard reaction was, well, they have to eat, they have to live, they have to go buy new suits of Lincoln Green. Yeah, but see, yeah, and then I got to thinking, I was like, oh, I don't know. But I still like him.
I know, I like him too. But like, there's things, like, everywhere he has power over, like, he's too assertive. Yeah. He came to a power. Yeah. It's like
That's very interesting. I wish we were meeting together next week. You know what? After you read the end, which you've read the end, after you read the end and you watch the video next week, if anybody wants to call me just to chat about Robin Hood, I'm not going anywhere for Christmas. And I know you're thinking, yeah, the last thing I'm going to do is call Mrs. Ferguson. But I'm quite serious. I will continue this discussion about Robin Hood getting too big for his britches, shall we say, if you want to. Because I would have fun doing that. Call me if you want to. Yes. Oh, yes. Or chat in the. Oh, yes. The comments are turned on. Bring it on. Oh, that's awesome. I try, but you know, when I don't, not everybody might be available to do it when I'm teaching. And then I don't know how to record. I don't know how to record and live stream at the same time. Okay. Okay. You mean just schedule when I post it then? Because I was going to post it Tuesday night. Well, but there's no difference if you can just watch it whenever. But I guess the comments could be live. Then is what you're saying. Okay. I'll think about that. I'll consider. I don't know. I'm not very techie, Simeon. I don't know how to do these things. My husband knows. Yeah. You know what? The problem is, it says, "Thou shalt not steal," in the Ten Commandments. And it does not say, unfortunately for my love for Robin Hood, "Thou shalt not steal unless the person you're taking it from is a big dirty rotter who stole it from other people, in which case help yourself." If that's in there, I missed that part of the verse. I don't think that's in there.
He's like, yeah.
Well, and it is ambiguous what he's doing with all of it. We don't know that he's not going to sell that third of the silk and give the proceeds to the poor. We don't know that. Okay, yes. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the common topics that we learn, the high schoolers work on, and maybe some of you have done this before, when we brainstorm ideas, is definition. What is the thing we're talking about? Is it stealing? Or is it righting an injustice? Is it just returning to the rightful owners what they had before? Or is it theft? It depends on how you look at it.
Like, does Robin Hood, discern, honestly, does he just look at the person's financial status, or does he look at their character? Does he steal from people who have honestly earned their money, or does he steal from people who have,
Yes. And how does he know? Does he know everyone? Okay, last comment.
I would say stealing, because what are the chances that these, so I'm guessing that they're kind of already poor and they got the money from them. But what are the chances that, so remember how you said the third of the book? What are the chances that they have?
Yeah, but it could have been transferred. Like it could have been money that purchased the silk.
Right, but how do you know how much money?
This is true. This is true.
If you did just give them the silk, they probably wouldn't have some.
Yes.
So,
But I think,
and when he took some for himself.
but the idea being that they could have taken money from the poor and then purchased the silk, and the silk could be turned back into money and be given out. It's tough. I'm looking forward now to reading the comments. I challenge you, after you finish the book, to see if you've changed your opinion of Robin Hood, or if you have further arguments for one side or another. Have a lovely Christmas time, and I will see you next year in January.